Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. In a moment, I'll be joined by Molly Ovenden, and we will be discussing how to experience and appreciate poetry. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Molly, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Bruce. I'm excited to be here.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Thank you. Well, I'm Molly Ovenden. I am living in Duluth, Minnesota, and I am a typewriter poet, as well as writer, artist, creative coach, and speaker. So I love helping especially women become the writers they're made to be. And I help people make creativity a habit so that the rest of their lives can thrive.
Well, the first question is obvious. What in the world is a typewriter poet?
I love that question. It is kind of what it says on the tin, but let me tell you what the tin says. So typewriter, I use a vintage Smith Corona Classic 12 typewriter, and I just recently was given a new old typewriter that I'll be adding to my collection. And I go into public places with permission of the establishments, and I set up a sign with my vintage typewriter. And my sign says, "Want a poem? Pick a topic. I'll write while you wait." And this draws in, with my smile and greeting people at the table, this draws in people to start to have a conversation. And some people are straight away interested in having a poem written spontaneously for them. So I'll ask them some questions about the topic. Then I'll write a rough draft of it in my notebook. Then I type it up on my vintage typewriter and perform it for the recipient of the poem. They get to keep that copy, and then I keep a copy, which I put in a future book. So it's all about having a spontaneous poem written for you on the spot.
Another question which I have to ask, where do you get the ribbons?
Yeah, just on the internet. There are a few different ribbon suppliers, and it seems like vintage typewriters are sort of having a little comeback right now. So fortunately, there's good access for the ribbons.
Well, it's off topic, but when I was a fundraiser, I was invited to the headquarters of IBM. And it's virtually a museum. They have one example of everything they've ever produced. With the exception of their first computer, they just had a model of it. The original is in the British Museum. I don't remember why. But anyways, as I'm walking through, hosted by the VP of Human Resources, there are the typewriters. And I see the Selectric on which I typed my master's thesis. And I stopped and I said, if you guys were smart, I'm in IBM. All right, what do I know? I'm a nobody. If you guys were smart, you'd bring those back. She turned around, she looked at me and said, "Bruce, everyone who I bring back here stops here and tells us to bring it back. I have told them, they won't listen to me." So just a cute story, not exactly poetry.
No, it's really fun though. And I think that's one of the things that I've loved especially is those nostalgic, those memories, those haunting thesis typing memories that people have. And there's something about the sound and the aesthetic of seeing. There's nothing like a typewriter. Our laptops, our computers aren't like that now. There's so much more manual getting into it when you actually are typing it as opposed to just touching. Now we have, all the touch pads.
I've seen it. I've heard it. You can get, I don't know what, an app, a program, whatever, that when you press the keys on the keyboard, it sounds like a typewriter.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fascinating. Oh,
But
wow.
the thing that I think about with the manual now, this electric was obviously electric,
Yeah.
was when my fingers would get caught between the keys.
Yes.
You know
That
of
is
what
a
I speak.
hazard.
Yeah, now I know that you're telling the truth and you're using old typewriters.
Yeah.
Now, I am not anti-poetry. There are 4 poems that I like.
Hmm.
Charge of the Light Brigade, High Flight, If, and Gunga Din. So I
Mhm.
am not anti-poetry. My first question for you is, I spoke with a musician
Mhm.
and I asked him if the lyrics to a song are a poem set to music.
Mm.
And at first he said yes, and then he said no, and then he went back to yes. Are the poems that you write songs or lyrics without music?
Mm.
Or
What a
are
cool.
lyrics poetry?
Yeah.
Answer it however you want.
I think that's such a cool question. And I think it's yes, and I think it's multiple things where as a creative, there are so many directions that you can take a piece. So when I'm out with my typewriter, when I'm talking with an individual person to write a poem that's just for them with something that's on their heart or wanting to give a gift to somebody, I'm writing a poem. I'm writing an experience, capturing a moment in time that comes out very differently. Sometimes it rhymes, sometimes it's uh, mismatched, disconnected thoughts, but all together to encapsulate the experience. Some of the poems that I've written have been inspiration for songs that others have, people who write songs, musicians have said, oh my gosh, this could be a song. And so for me, the poetry that I write is very multi-style, really what comes out at the time. And so, yes, like sometimes the poems I write could could go with music. And other times they they're more an expression that just comes out and is more of an experience or a container for an emotion that the recipient wants to express. And in terms of songwriting, I've done a little bit of songwriting and I do have a background. I played trumpet for 10 or 12 years and I understand musicality. And I think there's a tension in that where it sometimes when you are putting words to music, you need to make the words fit with the music so that it's kind of like the sounds of the words opposed to the meaning of the words that comes out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you write, do you hear a melody or do you just hear the words in your head?
I hear words and often see a picture.
Okay, that's good. Now, I read 2 famous poems once. It took me about a month. The first one was called the Iliad and the other was called the Odyssey. And there was a time when there were epic poems was the way that people communicated in writing.
Yeah.
Poetry has lost its shine, its luster.
Yes.
Why?
Because we don't understand it in some ways. So those 2 poems that you described are epics, and they've come out of an oral tradition in which people learned how to memorize stories long form to be able to communicate them. And when it's written in a poetic way with rhyming and all sorts of literary devices put in there, they're actually memory tricks for people who were carrying that message with them in that story. in school, and I'm saying this as someone who's trained as a middle school, high school language arts teacher, in school, we learn, and often I learn to teach how to dissect a poem, how to identify the different parts. What is onomatopoeia? What is a stanza? What are some different names of types of poetry? In the same way, I think that we learn how to dissect a frog in biology. So we pull apart this poem, and then we're like, right, now what? It's all in bits. But I want to go back to the oral piece that you said of these two poems that you brought up. That's why I love this performance aspect of poetry, because I think poems are meant to be experienced. And when we just read them on the page, it's just words often. And poetry is something to go with a voice, is something that we need the tone. We need to hear how the alliteration, the repetition of the initial consonant sounds at the beginning of each word in a phrase, a chain of them, sounds different than how it appears. And I think it's that experience that we've lost because we teach it via reading it on a page as opposed to speaking it or performing it or allowing ourselves to feel. So, you know how you listen to a song sometimes and there's one that it makes you tear up, or you just feel something. And when music does that for us, it's really powerful, and that we're experiencing the music, but you could read the lyrics or you could see the notes on the page for a song, and for a lot of people it just is black dots with a black line.
Yeah.
And I think that poems on a page are like that too. So I think for a lot of people, they're very similar to you. And even many who have asked me to write a poem for them, they've been skeptical. But once they were able to experience it, there's something really special that happens.
You said something, and I was considering whether or not I should build on that, because this will come across as a nasty question. But since when you said dissecting the poems, I immediately was going to come back and say, well, the only thing I dissected in school was frogs. So since you stole that, I'm now going to ask you the nasty question. You said that one of the reasons that poetry has lost its luster is that people don't understand today's poetry.
Hmm.
Here comes the nasty question. Isn't that the fault of the poet?
Hmm. Interesting. I love that. I don't think it's nasty either. I think it's a really curious question. For me, I don't think I can say all. The majority of art that I create, I long to create a connection. So for me, like when I paint something, I always give it an actual title. I don't call it untitled, or I don't leave it without a title, because I want the viewer to come in to experience it and have a starting point. And for me, when I write, I think that I want to create that sacred connection as I'm out with my typewriter with the individuals who come up to me. Is it the fault of the poet? Maybe. But what is the purpose of their poetry? Sometimes we write in order to just create this like container for this thing that we're experiencing that we don't know how to articulate. And then we just put it in this safe box of a poem. And that can help. There are so many reasons to write poetry, and there are so many types of poems as well, which baffles me. I think I have lifetimes of learning about different structures of poetry. Why a poet writes a poem is very personal, and there are a lot of poems that are written for the sake of form. And also, I think it's a personality thing. There's a lot of writers who are very introverted and who write because connecting one-on-one or in groups, or it can be really intimidating, and they stumble over their words in person, and writing is a way that they can express it. And sometimes these things they're trying to express are really deep and are maybe ahead of the time of the people who are ready. So often, like, master works of art are only cherished and financially valued once the artist has died. I think that's sad, but I think it's also a sign that sometimes as creatives we make work that we are able to see something that's coming that our present company aren't aware of. So a long-winded way to answer that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
that's
that's
kind of
fine.
what I'm thinking.
It's funny because yesterday I was only half listening, but I think I heard that a Picasso just sold for $20 million.
Wow.
So there you go. Now, in school, I don't remember the book. I don't think it was For Who the Bell Tolls, but it's not important. We had a recording of an interview with Hemingway.
Hmm.
And the interviewer asked him, what was it? I'm making this up because I don't remember what the book was. What was the symbolism of the cup? And Hemingway said there was no symbolism. Cup's a cup. You put into it whatever you want to interpret it some way. I just needed the character to have a cup in his hand. I put a cup in his hand.
Yeah.
It's the same way with poetry. It's just
Yep.
any written word, any visual
Mhm.
piece of art.
Yep.
Different people would see different things. I got into a heated argument with a friend's 10-year-old daughter. They invited me to stay over for the weekend, and I was sleeping in her room, and I saw a painting she had drawn, and I said, I like the painting of the grasshopper. And she looked at me and she said, what grasshopper? And I went, I pointed to her. She goes, no, that's not a grasshopper. That's a lady. And it was a fight that kept on for
Mhm.
that's a grasshopper. And she wasn't offended or anything.
Yeah.
You don't, once you've completed your work,
Mm.
you have no control over it.
No.
So you sent out your baby.
Mhm.
And you want it to be a message about the importance of flowers,
Mhm.
and somebody else reads it and says, this is what she's really talking about is the importance of hard work.
Mhm.
Now, as long as they don't say it's the importance of bigotry, racism,
Mhm.
pedophilia, you choose. As long, are you offended because they didn't get it? Or is it okay? They found something else positive in your work.
Yeah, I I would say it's the positive thing. And really my reaction has genuinely been like, "Oh, cool. You see that? That's interesting. Okay, now I see that too." And I think my ability to do that is definitely a practiced one. When I was first having open studio with my visual art, there was some work that I was not pleased with that ended up being what everyone was attracted to. And I learned to say in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, why do you like that? And out loud, I said, oh, what do you love about it? And then I listened, and then they showed me what they loved. And then I, in turn, loved it too. And this has happened with the poems time and time again that I'll write it about something, but with, from having interviewed them and asked them some questions, but then there's stuff that comes out and they're like, I didn't tell you about X, Y, or Z. How did you write that? I'm like, I don't know. Like I've just written something. And then we always bring meaning and experience into every interaction with humans, and especially with art. If we allow ourselves to sit in it, we're going to find something, and it's always related to something else that we've experienced, or our thoughts or beliefs. We make meaning as humans. That's what we do. And I find the creative process fascinating in that. And it can be I'm learning to be open-handed and experience the generosity in, I've simply written 15 lines and you have framed it and you read it every day. And then people that it's not for love it in the books, and they read it. And I'm like, how cool is that I just wrote you a poem, and all these other people. I had someone recently say, I was reading your book, this Poems for My People, and I found one of the poems and I read it at my sister's wedding because I had to give a speech, and I read this because it said everything that I wanted to say. And I'm like, that's cool. I wrote it for someone completely different, for some totally different reason. And I feel like, what cool abundance and generosity is there in creative output if we don't have to make it be what we need it to be?
You said, I've written a 15-line poem, and then you framed it. And when you said that, I was thinking of framing as in the context of the poem. But you meant a physical frame in putting on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to another question. Words have sometimes different meanings, and either one of them can be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you be sure that you're getting your message across in the poem?
Yeah.
That was the nasty
do
one.
I have to be sure? Do I have to be so, this may sound nasty, arrogant to assert that there is only one meaning in this work that I've created? Am I such a big deal that this is the only thing that it could mean? For me, I'm not, if you get something else out of it, cool. It was an experience that we captured. When I go into art galleries and write ekphrastic poetry, so simply put, you experience a piece of art and you write something in response to it in various poetic forms. I think it's the experience. And so, like, is an experience exact? And is that the only thing that was happening? No, there's so many layers that go into it. And, if I'm writing a poem specifically, like, it has to be about sisterhood or something like that, the person who's asked for a poem about sisterhood, I've asked them some follow-up questions about different things, and others may not experience it as sisterhood, but when the person who's requested it has that, because that's their frame of reference for context, then awesome. Then my job is good. I jokingly, in all seriousness, say, like, it's been a good day when I make someone cry. And so when it hits that for that person, its job is done. Like, if someone else enjoys it or gets something else out of it, cool. But that connection, and that has happened hundreds and hundreds of times, where the personal connection that they asked for the poem about has hit. And so I think, you know what? Awesome. And then if it doesn't hit, I mean, I'm not a machine. I'm a human. I'm doing my best. And so then I'll write you another one, or, or just
Because
sit
you
with
are a
it.
human and you are a writer, and I've been known for some of my writings as well.
Mhm.
How do you deal with writer's block?
Yeah.
And especially in your case, you're sitting there, somebody comes over to you, says, I want a poem about such and such, and you don't have a clue.
Yeah. Takes me a little bit longer, but I'll tell you what, Bruce, doing this live performance poetry
Hmm?
is such a practice in just letting what comes out come out. And I have learned how to overcome that editor and critic that I still have. I just don't listen to it very much anymore. Just get something out. I remember so many people are scared of the blank page. I guess I can't remember who exactly said this, but if you just stare at a blinking cursor on your computer, that is intimidating. But if you write, I don't know what to write, I wonder if I write about da da da, and you just allow something to come out, whether it's garbage or gold, then you have something to work with.
Are you a good? I'm terrible at this. Are you good at editing yourself?
When it's prose work, yes, I think I can do that. I have a pretty good eye. And one of the keys tricks to that is reading it out loud because it hits differently.
And I wait, if I have the time, I'll wait a few days, I'll wait a week. My articles on LinkedIn, I've already written for the next 2, maybe 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that when I get to it to proof it before I publish it, so to speak, online,
yeah,
I'm no longer quote unquote married to the first paragraph or to this sentence or that word.
yep.
I'm really shocked at this. I thought that this was going to be an absolute nightmare for me because I'm not exactly what one would call a fan of poetry. But I got to give you credit. This has been, and I say this sincerely, this has been very interesting for me. I've enjoyed it immensely. Before I let you go, I have one I've put up, as you can see, your contact information. I want to thank you profusely. But before I let you go, one last question. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
Do you have to be a writer who writes every day, or can you be a writer without writing daily? This is a quandary that a lot of folks who are tentatively wanting to write. And I believe that we're all made to be creative. So whether we build physical bridges as civil engineers or we build relational bridges as great neighbors, everything in between requires creativity. If you are a writer, it's how you perceive the world. Engineers perceive the world in one way, people who are relationships experts perceive the world in another. If you're a writer, it's how you experience the world. And the pace at which you get words from brain to page and into the hands of readers who will devour them, that's very personal, and every project is different. So you can absolutely call yourself a writer if that's how you experience the world, even if you don't write every single day.
Molly, thank you so much. I
Thank you,
sincerely
Bruce.
appreciate this, and I'm sure our viewers do as well.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.